Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Malvin. For those who don't know me, I'm a birth worker, a life coach, hypnotist, and a former liberal feminist turned radical truth teller. On this podcast, I expose the forces at play attempting to control our minds and bodies, such as transgender ideology, pornography, prostitution, and so much more. Together, we'll untangle patriarchal lies as you listen to jaw-dropping interviews with women from around the world. Warning, while listening to this podcast, you might find yourself triggered or perhaps notice where you've been biting your tongue on the issues that matter most to you. In my coaching and hypnosis, I help women and men stop getting triggered by every single thing, cultivate resilience, stop unwanted behaviors, and increase self-confidence. You can book your first session at whosebodyisit.com, and you can find that link in the episode show notes. And I just want to say that it's because of your endless support that I'm able to interview amazing women, get their stories out, and produce regular episodes for you. So with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And if you're listening in, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also consider making a financial contribution via the link in my show notes. You can also visit my activist sticker shop. My pro-woman stickers have the power to intercept transhumanist programming. So take a photo of your stickers out in the wild and tag me on Instagram at Whose Body Is It. So if we're connected on Instagram, you may have seen me hinting at a couple masterclasses I've been working on behind the scenes with some really incredible collaborators. I am going to be releasing more details on the upcoming masterclasses, particularly the one coming up in May. I'm going to be releasing more details via my newsletter on a Monday. So if you are not already subscribed to my newsletter, you can do that via whosebodyisit.com. I don't spam you. Pretty much you're signing up to get access to early bird pricing, to get notified when I have new podcast episodes out, and then other free resources that I update periodically. So make sure to sign up for my newsletter. That is where I'm going to be releasing more details about the upcoming masterclasses. And also, you will only be able to get access to early bird pricing if you are on my newsletter. I will not be releasing that to anyone else. You have to be a newsletter subscriber to get that special deal. So stay tuned and let's get into this week's story. Amanda Savage Brown's doctors told her that her silicone breast implants were a completely safe, permanent solution to change her silhouette after breastfeeding. She looked down and saw her ski slope breasts, and when she compared herself to other women, she felt she came up short. The implants were cold, stiff, and eventually began leaking toxins inside her body. When her symptoms got worse, she discovered that her doctors did not have the data to back up claims that her breast implants were perfectly safe or that her mysterious autoimmune reactions were coincidental. Amanda is now a psychotherapist and author of Busting Free, a comprehensive guide to physical and psychological well-being for women at any stage of the breast explant process. She works with women on healing the beliefs that lead us to question our value, allowing us to be manipulated by predatory marketing. Breasts are not just about beauty and self-esteem. They stand for our self-conception as women and as mothers. That's also why breast removal is pushed so hard on women who disidentify with their female bodies. We explore how cosmetic surgery, an industry dominated by male surgeons, works to support the sexualization and objectification of women. We also dive deep into the appetitive effect and the illusion of informed consent. Amanda also exposes the conveyor belt from breast cancer to breast reconstruction and the epidemic of women who experience breast implant illness after being told that breast cancer was the worst fate they could face. Even if you've never had breast implants, you'll be able to relate to the discussion of the desire to belong based on the shape and size of our bodies. We're going to be getting through a lot, and I'm just so excited to have you, Amanda, here to take us through the history of all of this, how we got here, and the conveyor belt that women are on presently to get these implants. So, would you first start by telling us a little bit about how you came to be talking about this issue?
Sure. And thank you, Isabella, for having me. I'm excited to be here and share about this, because I think, like you were just wisely pointing out, that this is a really big issue. And while some people end up putting breast implants in, others don't. But most of us at least know someone or love someone who's somewhere on a breast implant or explant journey, or our life might come to a crossroads where we need to make that decision for ourselves. And then you realize just how intense the social programming is of women around breasts and belonging. So I started talking about this, which was an interesting transition for me as a therapist. We're kind of trained to be a little bit more private and quiet. And so it had to be something pretty important for me to step forward and get more of a public facing aspect to my work. I had breast implants put in 2006 after I had my last child and I nursed. And my mind just wouldn't let go that my post-nursing breast aesthetics were in some way threatening to me, even though no one was messaging that to me. It was just a completely internalized reaction that I was having as I was judging myself against this deeply ingrained social programming that I just wasn't aware. It's placed in all of our minds without our awareness, choice, or consent. And so I got breast implants in 2006, and I lived with them for 12 and a half years. I had a lot of local problems with them. What I mean is things right around the implants. So they were cold. I got capsular contracture, which is a very common thing where they just don't move. They become very stiff. They're just hard, unnatural looking. And I had a lot of other things going on that I never attributed to my breast implants. And, we'll probably talk more about systemic effects from breast implants. And I didn't realize until after I explanted just how much my body was battling by having these foreign, unnatural, chemical-filled things placed right there, next to your heart and your lungs. So I ultimately decided to remove mine as the result of a rupture, a post-mammogram rupture. And I moved through the explant journey, and that's when I was being gaslit about breast implant illness, that systemic health effects from breast implants. I didn't even know it was a thing, but I was being gaslit about it. So as a former public health scientist and as a psychotherapist, I became very concerned about what was happening to women who were seeking care for that particular experience for breast implant illness. So I, true to my nature, started looking into it. And that's when I realized that there was just this whole world of considerable numbers of women struggling with these journeys and systemic effects from breast implants and breast implant removal. And I noticed there was a lot of support for the surgical considerations, and that there was nothing really developed from professionals to support women with the psychic aspect, the mental and emotional, and then even the social aspect. Breasts are these icons of femininity, and so much so they matter so much to us that we live in societies that offer us these temporary and problem-prone devices to, quote, fix our breasts. And then when it comes time to remove those devices, or if those devices aren't working out for us, we're just supposed to white knuckle through that silhouette altering surgery, and no one signs up for breast implants hoping to be disappointed, least of which breast cancer survivors, right? And so no one's immune from this experience. Once you have breast implants put in, you inevitably must choose to replace or remove them. And we'll probably talk a lot more about, the current recommendations around them. But that's how I started talking about this, was when I saw that gap in the psychosocial care for women on these journeys. I knew that I could translate the evidence-based approaches that I use in my private practice to specifically fill those gaps and to help women. I have a mission to liberate women from, our socially inherited beliefs about our breasts, our body, and our belonging. And so that's what was important enough to get me to come forward and start talking, not just about my personal journey. I do that so that women understand I get it, but, to also bring forth this program that I've developed for women on these journeys.
It's so important. And I think a major frustration that I found in like conventional psychotherapy, or women who are coming to me talk about, is the impersonal aspect of like wanting to break that wall of be like, but don't you get it? Or what do you think? Or like, as a sister, can you just talk to me as a sister?
Yes.
And, so I think that, I think my audience will, of course, appreciate what you've just said on many levels. But
yeah, a lot of women that reach out to me say, I just really want to talk to somebody who I know gets it. I really want to be with somebody who understands. And I do. I've just spent years of my life really trying to understand these experiences, through a contextual behavioral lens, to really help normalize and validate and take away this stigma. There's just so much judgment around breast implant surgery and even explant surgery. And is it okay if I swear? Is that okay with your listeners?
Yes, absolutely.
I just call bullshit on that, because, you grow up in a society where there's so much messaging that this part of your body is so, so important and holds so much symbolic meaning. And then if you have a surgery to augment, restore, or reconstruct that part of your body, it's like you're supposed to hide it or let it be as natural as possible, or there's just a lot of double standards in this area of women's health. And we are talking about multiple millions of women. In 2021, globally, there was an estimated 1.7 million breast augmentation surgeries. So that's just 1 year. And, that statistic has only changed 0.5% since 2017. So these devices have been being put into women's bodies for decades and decades. And so we're talking about multiple millions of women. And then to just leave them to white knuckle through what happens when these devices aren't working out for you, or you don't want them anymore. It's just totally unhelpful and a ridiculous double standard.
Can you speak to the history of this part of the cosmetic surgery industry? Like, when did it become common for women, let's just say like in North America or in the US, to start doing this to their bodies? Like, was it the 1940s? Was it the 70s? Like, can you take us through a bit of a history of how that came to be?
Yeah. Breast implants as we know them were introduced in the 1960s, and they originally had the silicone breast implants, that ultimately in the 90s, there was a moratorium placed on them, and they were deemed to be, unsafe, and they were taken off the market. And so in addition to silicone breast implants, there's also saline filled breast implants. And so, although the silicone was removed from the market, the saline was there and being used. And so, I think in the 90s, at least if you speak with someone who's in the Gen X age, they'll all kind of refer to Pamela Anderson, Baywatch. That was really when that body type was being, regaled and pursued. It's much like what the current generation is seeing with the proportions with the Kardashians and the Brazilian butt lifts and the, really tiny waists and everything else augmented to very unnatural proportions. So with straight up breast implants, a lot of people look back and really say that it was, in the 80s when, and I should look at the statistics to be able to, speak to that with confidence, but that it was in the 80s when it was really, really becoming popular. Breast augmentation is the darling of cosmetic surgery. It's, for many, many years, it's in the number one spot as most common procedure. In the last couple of years, it's not in the number one spot. And there's some theories behind why that may be. One of them is, in 2020, everybody started doing the Zoom interactions. And so everybody was starting to see their self, basically chest up. And there's more face surgeries, more facial cosmetic surgeries, and the breast implants kind of lost a little bit of ground. And like I said, globally in 2021, it ranked second after liposuction. So getting fat removed from your body. And then in 2006, so there was the moratorium in the 90s. And then in 2005, 2006, silicone was reintroduced into the North American market. The FDA is the regulatory body whose job is to ensure that medical devices, one of its job is to ensure that medical devices are safe and to inform, providers and the public about any risks with them. And so when they were reintroduced, there was a lot of post-approval conditions that needed to be met in order for these devices to be, being used. And unfortunately, a lot of those conditions weren't met. There wasn't appropriate follow-up studies done. I was in a clinical study, and that helped me feel better about getting breast implants. It just getting them kind of was a values violation for me. So being in a clinical study helped me feel like I was in some way making that, less of a stretch for myself. And I participated. I went to my appointments. I filled out the questionnaires, but it just suddenly and abruptly ended. And a lot of women that were in those clinical studies have the same story as me. It just suddenly ended. And, those very short windows of data collection in no way represents what's happening to a woman when she keeps a device for 10 to 15 years. I was told you could keep them for life, which, we know that's not true anymore. But a lot of women believe that and were told that they're lifetime, totally safe devices. Now, the current history, the most recent history is that every year for the last several years, there have been important news releases and safety alerts coming out from the FDA about these devices. In 2019, we were alerted to breast implant associated lymphomas. In 2020, they started using language acknowledging breast implant illness and systemic health effects. In 2021, there was a boxed warning, which is their highest safety alert, which was placed on breast implants. In 2022, the FDA alerted people to another breast implant associated cancer called squamous cell carcinoma. So there's, in my opinion, both just looking at it from the outside, but then also from my own practice, I describe this as a tsunami in women's health because of those multiple millions of women that have breast implants in their bodies right now. And then these news releases coming out and these safety alerts coming out, and women now understanding they can't keep them for life and that they aren't problem free. And some understand they weren't really appropriately studied, but not as many. That's not being messaged. But the FDA has wonderful guidance documents too, like things to consider before getting breast implants. And if that document had existed in 2006, I would have never got them myself. But it outlines all of these things that I'm talking about and highlighting. So, they're not totally safe. They're not lifetime devices. And it's been this way for women for so long. And the other thing, briefly, that was going on in the 90s that led to that moratorium was that women were getting very sick. They were reporting systemic illnesses. They were reporting breast implant illness back then. They didn't call it that back then, but there's a Jenny Jones episode, an Oprah Winfrey episode. Connie Chung did an investigative report, and women were coming forward and, with pictures of themselves and shared experiences and talking about being made sick by their implants. And again, there was the moratorium, but in the 90s, there was no internet. People were trying to connect with fax machines, and so what happened is when they got reintroduced in the mid 2000s, about 10 years later, women started getting sick again, but this time there was the internet. And now women from around the world are able to connect with one another and learn from one another, in ways that just can't be silenced as easily as it was in the 90s.
Do you think, even with this information, that when women are making this decision, it's based on the real potential for these side effects? Or do you think the cultural programming and the social programming is so strong that they're really after the feeling or the illusion of what they're going to get, when they sign up for this? Not to say that, I feel weird about informed consent because there is so much else that we're going to get into that you cover in your work and in the book for why a woman would make this decision. So yeah, what do you think at the end of the day, why, even if a woman knows that, it could be harmful, it could, result in another surgery, or this is what they're being told and believe this, and that there is a possibility that this or that could happen. Is it that it's just so played down, or is it also that drive to get that feeling is so strong that it overrides?
You're just so wise to ask that. That's really, from my perspective, the question to be asking, right? And there has been one study recently that was published that looked at a change of mind after a more appropriate, a more informed consent than what women have traditionally received. And there was a change of mind reported among some, but not all, women considering breast implant surgery. And so, what we know is, if you're looking at before and after pictures and you see before pictures that you identify with, that looks like you, either you have asymmetrical breasts, you have tuberous breasts, you have, women refer to post-nursing breasts as fried egg breasts, whatever that is. If you see before pictures that look like you, your mind puts your own appearance into a network of beliefs that basically equals bad, needing to be fixed, not good enough, not safe. And so when you see these after pictures where implants have been installed, then the implants are associated with relief, deliverance, measuring up, being good enough, and being fixed. And they become something that, from a behavior perspective, is called appetitive. You want to pursue it, you want it. And so by the time you get to the doctor's office, and they're going over, you've got a chance of this happening, whatever it is, they can say, let's say, for example, you have a 50% chance of this negative experience. The woman who's holding an appetitive frame around these devices is going to hear she's got a 50% chance that that's not going to happen to her.
Right.
Right. So she might want to just roll those dice. And it's going to depend on the person, her values, her personal history, her family history, how different things land with her and how much it's going to shape her behavior and determine ultimately if she moves forward with the surgery or not. Advocates in this space, of course, we want women to be fully informed. And if they move forward with the surgery, at least they will know to watch out and be alert for these things, as opposed to decades and decades and decades of women who were told that these are one and done, get it and forget it surgeries. That's bullshit. That's how you set a woman up to be unhealthy. That's how you set her up to struggle and suffer and not know to consider, maybe this is related to my body having an immune system whose entire job is designed to keep me safe from foreign invaders and foreign objects. If you were told it's one and done, get it and forget it, then you never stop to think about what's going on holistically in your body. So hopefully women who are getting them now are getting a more complete picture and will know to consider that when and if problems develop later on down the line.
So speaking to what they think they're getting, or the closer to the self they were, how could you talk a little bit about this, you use the phrase socially inherited thinking. Can you speak to the cultural meaning of breasts and what, from your experience and your work with women, what getting those implants means to them, or what it meant to you, or what you thought it was going to do for you? And then,
yeah, for sure. I mean, this is my favorite thing to talk about, because I will talk about it in terms of what I call the breast rule book, but all of our minds hold many of these socially inherited rule books. And so understanding how this one was formed and how you can liberate yourself from it can help you with all of this other stuff that we struggle with as well. So if you grow up in a society where breasts are sexualized, where they're objectified, what happens is two things. First, all little kid minds notice, irrespective of if you're in a society like ours where they're objectified, just all little kid minds notice, hey, ladies have breasts, women have breasts. So little kids just notice that. And then our minds love to see relationships between two things. Our minds like to see those relationships in both directions. So just out of a hobby, a little kid mind, once it learns, women have breasts, the little kid mind just on its own derives breasts are womanly. So, okay, then if you're in a society like ours where they're sexualized, they're objectified, they're idealized, there's a certain way for them to look, the mind continues doing that with arbitrary things that hold great meaning for us, like bigger breasts are better. And then it will derive smaller breasts are worse. Or it will learn that there's an ideal way for breasts to appear. And then it will learn there's a bad way for them to appear, or many bad ways. If there's this one idealized image, and by the way, most of us, when we say the word breast, all of us kind of have the same image that comes to our mind. That's the social program that I'm talking about. And it's basically, they've looked at this, and it's basically a fullness from the nipple underneath. And the nipple is it's symmetrically placed, pardon me. So it's centered, it's of a certain size, a certain intensity of color relative to the rest of the color, right? There's this ideal image. And so our mind learns that if yours varies by too much, then yours aren't good enough. They don't measure up, and also, unfortunately, there's all of this messaging, social messaging about body proportions, balance, how confident you will feel in a swimsuit, lingerie during intimacy, or walking into a work meeting, right? It's like, all of this symbolic meaning is put on this body part and how it balances out the rest of your body. So I was actually really surprised when I started interviewing women. I did a What's Your Why series, and I was interviewing them on, why did your mind think you needed breast implants? And it was very, very interesting how many women told me I was not proportioned appropriately. I just wasn't. I would try on a dress, and it's like I needed two different sizes, a size to fit my waist down and a size to fit waist up. And rather than think that maybe the dress had been made unrealistically, I thought I was the problem. And that was shared a lot with me. So that's the social programming is, it's just an exquisitely bad combination between how the human mind works and learns and creates big, vast networks of beliefs and all of this messaging around breasts. And, I think there's a lot of really deep historic stuff here with this, like it or not, eons ago, and not even that long ago, but you can just take, 16th century England, right? And, part of that whole jockeying for families was this viewing daughters as ways to better the marriage, better the family standing through marriage, right? And you wanted your daughter to appear fertile. You wanted your daughter to have, that's what all those corsets were about, and all that stuff pushing up the breasts, that was associated with fertility and getting that all desired male heir, so this stuff, it is socially inherited. Breasts have held a lot of important and symbolic meaning for really a very, very long time. And so this happens to us without our awareness. We don't give permission to it. We just all learn that this part of the body holds some meaning. And then, it depends on what else is going on in your life as to how intensely you grip this mental rule book. If you are really involved in a sport where you want and benefit from a very slim, sleek profile, then you're not really gripping to that rule book in the same way, right? So context really, really matters. Mm-hmm. And that's why not everybody just, files down this line towards these surgeries. And also, there's a lot of women who can spend decades of their life not really thinking much about these rules, these social rules about their breasts, because their breasts are within some kind of, margin of this rule book. But if she gains weight, loses weight, has age related changes, pregnancy related changes, nursing related changes, if she gets breast cancer, right? When one of those changes comes along and then pulls her too far from being in alignment with that rule book, then that part of her mind that cares about her social belonging and all of that kicks in, just like mine, and starts saying, hey, maybe you should do something about that. This doesn't feel as safe as all these other decades that you've lived and looked this other way. And there's plenty of people that are willing to put those devices into women. So it's a pretty normalized thing in our society.
It's interesting, yeah, hearing you speak about the rule book, as you were sharing kind of the socially informed, the messaging that we are getting. I was thinking about the messaging that we aren't getting, like that our breasts are cyclical, like that our breasts have a cycles along with our uterus, our roughly monthly experience as women that we go through. And then the other thing that I thought about was like the erotic pleasure that we can get from our own breasts, like for ourselves, like as a kind of a mutually mutually experienced thing, not men objectifying our breasts for their erotic pleasure, but a participatory experience. So there's all the messaging of what our breasts are used for, and then a kind of a secrecy around what they are actually doing, what they are actually capable of, and then by extension, just being able to nourish our children, and the marketing around formula, and how I've spoken to some women who have decided, who have gotten prophylactic double mastectomies, who are still unsure if they want kids, but have now eliminated the ability to provide that for their kids. And I don't think that would be possible without the narrative that breast milk actually isn't that necessary for your kids. There's another way, and yes, technically, humans can be sustained on formula, but it's not optimal. It's not optimal. And and so I think so. That's what came up as you were sharing about that rule book, or that margin of normal, and how I appreciate you saying that, like, really none of us are immune, because we don't know what's going, we never know, like, the way that we're going to be preyed upon and when that will happen, which is why you sharing this information is so important.
And it's really, to drive the point home, there are cultures right now, there's societies right now on the planet where they don't fondle breasts during sex. They aren't sexualized. They would never think of, oral play with breasts, because they're viewed as food for infants, and so in those cultures, the minds aren't moving in a way where after nursing, the woman is left feeling less than. It doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Because they don't have the same kind of learned symbolic meaning with breasts. My post-nursing breasts in another culture, I could have been very proud of them because they did their job amazingly, and yet, to your point, because that stuff isn't front and center, is not something that can be, have predatory practices around, because nursing doesn't have a multi-billion-dollar industry like baby formula. Instead of me feeling proud, I felt shame.
Well, you touched on it. You touched on this just a minute ago, but I think it's important that we talk about the reality of the sex of the people doing the surgery to the sex of the person receiving, that there's this. And I've heard so many stories of this with the gender identity, quote, medicine industry, where you have these young women, adolescent or early 20s, going in and they're confronted by primarily male surgeons who are cosmetic surgeons who are telling them, that nothing is a problem. Like, you want to have a fake penis? We'll make it happen. You regret getting your breast cut off? We can always put new ones back on.
Mm.
They'll look just as real
Mm.
as the old ones, but not mentioning that they will be completely actually not functional, and
Yeah.
let alone all of the, health risks involved that you've outlined. So yeah, will you talk a little bit about the male female dynamic when it comes to the actual the ins and outs of being in that medical industry, being a consumer of that product?
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. I don't know exactly what the statistics are in terms of gender distribution among plastic surgeons, cosmetic surgeons. But I do know that, like you said, it's very male dominated. And it's a very interesting thing. These going in for these consultations, having, that surgeon's mind holds the same breast rule book as yours and mine and anybody else. And so, there's this person who's got this breast rule book who doesn't have the personal lived experience of having breasts, of having them be a part of your sense of identity or your sense of worth or sense of safety, or having them be a source of ridicule, right? So this person doesn't have that lived experience. There are female plastic surgeons, but by and large, when it's a male, they don't know what it is that you've experienced or that you're wanting delivery from or what you're hoping for. They can speak to it because it's been written about so much, but they don't know about nursing. I mean, I personally felt that, when I was able to nurse that, and I couldn't with my first child, I was able to with our last child. And that experience, when I was nursing, I felt like I was connected with a sense of something really big, this sense of motherhood that wasn't even just limited to humans. I was thinking about all mammals around the globe. And it just, the releasing of the oxytocin, that bonding hormone, that peace, love, safety chemical. It's just a tremendous experience. When you are talking about altering your breasts with a male surgeon, they have no idea of that experience or what you may be giving up. So you can nurse with implants if that's a personal decision that you're comfortable with. And some women want to nurse with implants and they're unable to because there has been surgically induced damage and they're not able to nurse. So there's a lot of these experiences. And then there's this other part that, Isabel, it's this almost like if a woman has had systemic illness from her breast implants and she has been suffering and she is going to get them removed, and sometimes BII, that's the acronym for breast implant illness, it can be, harrowing. It can be deadly, right? And then there's this revering of these surgeons for having, quote, saved their life, and that's a very interesting dynamic to me. I know I've heard of women naming their children, their child, their next child after their surgeon, like really a lot of extreme, deep gratitude towards this person who is in a for-profit business and is charging, sometimes 5 figures for these surgeries. It isn't like out of the goodness of their heart. It's just a very interesting dynamic that can happen in this whole thing with the male female experience that I just watch. And I just want to say to the women, because I think it's another rule book, We've got the breast rule book, but we've also got this other kind of, I don't know, maybe you can put a word to it, but it's this, she's not seeing that she's saving her own life. She's the one who recognized this systemic issue, despite potentially being gaslit, despite controversial and conflicting information about it. She's the one who took the chance. She's the one who researched surgeries and surgeons and selected one. She's the one who's paying for it. She's saving her life, right? And I see that as kind of another one of these rule books. It's disempowering in some way to women to do this kind of, I don't know what word it is, but it's
maybe being grateful for crumbs, just like the bare minimum, seeing their decision to use the technology that they have available to them as like a moral, in being moral support of like your process, when in fact if you ask them to do the opposite, they would do that again too.
Well, it's interesting. And that is an important distinction, is that there's a special kind of surgeon called an explant only surgeon. And those are the ones that women can feel very passionate about, because they will no longer place breast implants. They will only remove them. And they get really attached to that because there is the potential to be gaslit and for people to not believe you that your breast implants are making you ill. And in this area of women's health, some women take a lot of meaning from that. It's very valuable to them to have a surgeon that won't put these harmful devices into anyone. And so that can really amplify that intense appreciation for the surgeon making that decision, when in fact, really, that's part of the oath that a doctor takes, right? Like once a doctor has seen patients who present with systemic health effects and then remove breast implants and recover, then that's them keeping their oath by saying, I won't put these devices in the body anymore. That's great. I'm glad that they're making that decision. And it's still, to this thing that we're having a hard time putting our finger on, I think it speaks to that of, it's just, I want women to feel a lot more, they're moving themselves through these journeys. Right. They're the ones that are reclaiming their life, reclaiming their health, reclaiming their well-being. They're paying someone to do a surgery for them.
Like, it's like joining another church, like deferring authority again, like rather than cultivating that inner authority and that sovereignty, it's just another deference and someone outside themselves, or a person outside themselves. It's like changing religions in some way. But so that's really, really helpful to hear. And I have engaged in some conversations when I've talked about breast implant illness or just broaching the topic. And I, just as someone who hasn't had, breast implants or, obviously breast implant illness, hearing people say, well, how do you know it's that? How do you know? Which is a valid question, but I imagine incredibly infuriating when you're literally have a leaky device, in you.
Yeah.
Foreign.
Yeah. Breast implant illness does not have a biomarker. You can't just go to the doctor and get your blood drawn or get something measured and then leave there with a diagnosis, a definitive diagnosis. And so, when you take into consideration that, breasts hold so much symbolic meaning, they matter to us so much that we will opt to surgically augment, restore, or reconstruct them. Mm-hmm. When it comes time to consider removing them for a health-related reason, it makes sense that a lot of women are going to want something more definitive. The list of breast implant illness symptoms includes a lot of non-specific things that, can come on mildly over the years and easily be attributed to other things. And it's just, part of a chronic inflammatory response that a human body can have. And it can just look like other things. So it's a very, difficult thing for women on these journeys. This part of their body matters to them. They had a surgery. They've got this device that they may or may not have been told everything to consider about it. And then, they may be wondering if part of why they're feeling bad is their body's just kind of losing that battle from the 24/7 exposure to these foreign objects. And they want a definitive answer. That's one of the top 3 things I companion women through in my practice is the what ifs if they're considering a BII related explant. And that's not the only reason that women explant, but BII related explant is very, very common. And if that is why they're moving toward that surgery, the what ifs can be pretty powerful. What if I don't feel better? What if this isn't why I experience this? What if I do this and I don't feel like it was worth it?
Can you speak to the breast cancer double mastectomy recipient or someone who has, undergone a double mastectomy for breast cancer related issues, and as you mentioned in a previous conversation, the conveyor belt into breast implants?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now in our country, at least, there are 4 solid pathways for a breast cancer post-mastectomy patient. And one of those pathways is reconstruction with breast implants. Another one is reconstruction with her own body tissue. Another one is aesthetic flat closure. And then another one is similar to that. It's called a Goldilocks. So it's not a totally flat chest. So now in our country, if a woman has breast cancer, she's post-mastectomy or moving through and preparing for mastectomy, most of those patients report that it is a very rushed time and where it is presented to her that, of course, she's going to reconstruct with breast implants, that, of course, she's going to reconstruct breast mounds, and any woman who, for any reason, may not be totally on board with that, if she is considering aesthetic flat closure, where she just doesn't want to put devices in her body that mean more surgeries. She doesn't want to put something in her body that comes with man-made cancers like breast implant associated squamous cell carcinoma, right? So if she just wants to go, mastectomy and be done, they have patronizing things said to them like, well, of course you have to have breasts. You won't feel whole or complete. You're not thinking straight. Some women have had to undergo mental examinations to prove that they were thinking straight. And that's just how deeply ingrained this concept that I talk about, the mental breast rule book, it is so deeply ingrained that it kind of creates that conveyor belt that breast cancer patients describe when they've had mastectomy, that they're just going towards implant-based reconstruction, and it's again, it just reflects this. And, to a point that you made earlier, when I have women, post-mastectomy women on my caseload who are ultimately now explanting to flat. So they did the implant-based reconstruction and it's not working out and they're getting those removed and they're going to explant to a flat chest. They will look back and lament and say, I didn't feel like I had any options and no one told me that there was another way for me. And then the other thing that they'll say is, these aren't my breasts. They didn't reconstruct my breasts. They reconstructed mounds. but I already lost my breasts.
Mm.
And for some women, it's really important. The breast implant reconstruction is a very important stepping stone for them. And it does help them kind of step through that grief and loss of that body part.
Mm-hmm.
And for others, when they're explanting to flat, they're just really grieving that there's more surgeries, that, the way that it's all worked out. So, if nothing else, what I've learned specializing in this area of women's health is that all of these journeys are highly nuanced, and that there's just really no room for us to be kind of judging one another or wagging our fingers at one another. I think our place is to recognize that really, I know this sounds cliche, but we are all in this together. If you grow up in a society like ours, we all have the same kind of stuff that goes through our minds. And then it's luck of the draw in terms of how much that's pushed you around on the inside and what external experiences you've had that kind of come together in a way that determines whether or not your life journey includes these devices.
To expand on that, there are so many. You're speaking to like the various profiles. Like there are some commonalities, obviously, that is informing these decisions, and the various profiles of each woman who is coming to this will vary and is nuanced. And the one like profile that came to mind was the woman who hasn't had breast cancer, but who is doing what's called the prophylactic double mastectomy, which like I take issue with. I don't know if we have enough time in this episode to go down that rabbit hole. Like what, I just can't wrap my head around the taking off the non-cancerous, potentially cancerous tissue to then put in a known verifiable dangerous device. And so that was like the first thing that struck me when I started reading about and hearing stories of women who are getting who are like in their late 20s, early 30s, getting these prophylactic double mastectomies, and like women like Angelina Jolie, normalizing this and setting like the trend for like, this is something you can do, this is something that is available to you. But the thought I had more specifically was how a woman who's having doing a quote prophylactic double mastectomy would feel about looking like she's a breast cancer survivor when she's not.
Yeah, they're called previvors, and they do feel, at least the ones that I've spoken with, that it's harder for them to find a place of belonging in all of this. Mm-hmm. For exactly what you just said, they're previvors, and so they didn't have breast cancer treatment, the chemicals, the radiation, all of that, and so they don't, they just feel differently. And there is it lands differently, like you're pointing out. If you've done something prophylactically and then the thing that was normalized, the device that was used to do the reconstruction, if you learn later that device is associated with a man-made cancer, there's some unusual and intense emotions with that. I prophylactically removed this part of my body to really minimize possibly getting breast cancer. And I was told I have a totally safe device. But what you're telling me is that this device is actually associated with a risk of other cancers, right? That is some righteous indignation that can show up, and it lands differently if you did it prophylactically versus, as part of a treatment. Mm-hmm. It just lands differently for them.
Mm-hmm. So, this comes up, this level of like regret or feeling of having been betrayed by doctors or family members, anyone who was for or in support of, whether we're talking about, the gender identity, quote medicine, the injectable prophylactic, hormonal birth control. A lot of women come to me who feel a lot of sadness, rage, regret, feelings of betrayal. What is your advice to women, or do you cover this in your book? And how can women move through this, coming to this information, as you said, which can be so confronting and like just upsetting to realize?
So in Busting Free, so that's the self-help book that I wrote for women on explant journeys. And it's designed for someone to be able to turn to it no matter where they are in their journey. If they're just at this place, where you're talking about of kind of discovering, wait, what, I can't keep these for life, or wait, they might actually put me at risk of cancer. So that book is there at that part of the journey. Or let's say you're much further along and you just don't want them in your body anymore, or let's say you've already removed them. That book helps women move through that. And one of the big main tenets of that is being able to companion yourself through those difficult thoughts and feelings, as opposed to what I see women do so much, which is I said there's three main things that I deal with in this specialty practice. But another one is the self-blame, and the regret and anger and all of these strong emotions. But being able to companion yourself through that and learn how to offer yourself genuine, abiding compassion, and to be able to turn self-acceptance from a concept into a practice. And the reason that this is all so important, the explant journey gives you this huge opportunity to learn all of these new, long overdue skills. And it's so important because we repeat what we don't repair. Right. So if you got on the implant table because of these behind the scenes processes going on in your mind relative to your social messaging, I mean, just think about how many things are messaged to women about how we ought to be, how we should behave, how we shouldn't behave, how we should age or not age, what we should do, how thick our eyebrows should be. Our lips better be full and balanced. I mean, there's no shortage of that. And so we will just continue moving forward, feeling threatened and having that kind of predatory stuff, leading us to feel not good enough, less than, and that we've got to fix the way we feel on the inside by fixing how we look on the outside. So, for women who are on these journeys and they want to emerge with a different way to be, a different way to navigate a society that, there is some very strong things that push us down paths that aren't the right choice for us. They are pushing us down paths that can lead us to becoming dependent upon other things or other devices or needing more surgeries. Breast implants are just one example, right? So this journey is an opportunity for you. It's why I called the book Busting Free. It's like a triple entendre, but one of the ways you're busting free is you're busting free of having this very normal part of being a human, caring about belonging to your group. That's normal, healthy behavior. That's why we survive as a species, right? But when that has a predatory spin so that industries can make a bunch of money off of you, this is your opportunity to learn a new way to be, right? And I've had women who, for one reason or another, read Busting Free, even though they aren't on these journeys. They were reading it for one reason or another. And they said that it was helping them really feel like they were learning the inner skills to be able to, you can't go into any store without seeing an image being projected at you that is designed to make you feel less than, or that you need to do something or buy something or invest in something to measure up well and to safely belong. And so that's what, the book's called Busting Free, but, for me, it's much more of a movement of trying to help women to bust free from all of this. And like I said, we repeat what we don't repair. So learning a new way to be with that very natural part of your mind that cares about how well you measure up. Just because it's sounding an alarm doesn't mean you have to act on it, right? If I had known in 2006, when that part of my mind was like, hey, your breasts look like ski slopes, you've got to fix them. Like if I'd known how to take care of that part of me, if I'd known how to respond to it differently, I would have had a totally different life. I'd be tens of thousands of dollars richer. I wouldn't have had those surgeries, and my body wouldn't be dealing with systemic health effects, and that's the gift that I want to give women who are struggling on these journeys. I'm not here to tell you how to feel on your journey. I'm not here pushing any particular agenda on you. But if you are feeling regret, hurt, anger, betrayal, if you are feeling like self-acceptance is hard for you and has been hard for you, if you want to learn a new way to be, or if you want to liberate yourself from this predatory practice about our human nature, then that book literally walks you through it. It's a walk the walk book.
I'm so glad that is available to women and that you've provided, a real, it's a really interactive book for those, wondering if there are worksheets, there are guides to, really help you move through everything that Amanda has brought up in this conversation. And I love that there's something for everyone on their journey. And I think also a great resource for any woman supporting another woman through like embodiment, issues, and that, cultivating that inner authority and getting to the root of the thing, because if it's not breast implants, it's going to be something else. It's just, that's the particular flavor that some women have chosen of seeking that likeness, or that tribal normal natural urge to just want to look like the other members of your group. I think
you want to belong.
Important. The belonging.
You just safely want to belong. We're designed to care about that. Eons ago, it meant that we got to stay alive, because if you got kicked out of your group, you were going to be eaten or frozen.
I think, in the context when I've talked about the double mastectomies and with the formerly trans-identified women, I always think of like the death of the mother, like the severing of the mother connection, that mammalian mammary part of us, that severing of the mother. You could kind of zoom out and just see how that's true in all realms, like we are disconnected from.
Like I always say, listen, this is really about, it's not about vanity. It's about humanity, and recognizing that this is a really big part, like it or not, agree with it or not, this part of the human body holds a lot of meaning around, femininity and womanhood. And it's, I think, why there's all of this energy and tension in the things that you talk about a lot,
Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for highlighting this really important issue for all of my audience. I just really appreciate your time and your work, and we'll link your book and your website in the episode show notes for women who want to learn more and start their healing journey wherever they are.
And thanks for having me. Like I said, I get these journeys, and I get this meaning. I get the grief that someone can feel, whether it's breast implants didn't work out for them, breast reconstruction. after mastectomy is not working out or needs to be reversed, or that pain of having had that double mastectomy, and then regretting it, and not, not understanding how you can move forward without that part of your body. So, I'm here for questions, support, and help with any of those experiences.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear this content. And if you do share it on social media, don't forget to follow and tag me at Whose Body Is It? So until next time.